So with no further ado, I just want to go to the next slide. I'm not going to go too much into detail. I want to give the time to the speakers. But I just want to remind you also, GSMA has a smart mobility community, so where we look at the different areas. In particularly, this is one of the areas where we have the drone interest group. And you can see on the bottom some of the names of the company that are actually parts of our community. On the next slide, we are also showcasing a little bit what we do in general. So we have case study, we have webinars like this one, we have white papers, and one of the white papers is indeed the one that we are going to talk about today, which is the business model, which has been very, let's say, the start of this conversation. And with this, I want to transfer it now to my colleague and one of the chair of the drone interest group, Alexander Brakaskis from TELUS. Alexander, I want to give it to you, and we can go down to the next slide where we see the agenda. If you can talk through the agenda,
sure,
please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Welcome everyone to Deep Dive Session 6. Today we had quite a packed agenda. We were splitting the 90 minutes into two parts. One is going through a walkthrough on white paper and walkthrough on some of the select of the use cases. Out of 18 use cases, we're going to present material on 4. And after that, the second part is kind of envisioned as a panel, where we will have a set of the panelists, both from the MNOs that were contributing to the content of the use cases, and also from some of the external organizations that have a technology solution or services solutions that are leading in their field and could enable MNOs to deliver some of those use cases. So we'll go through the details of who are the members of the panel, what are the use cases afterward, but you see them here on the screen. Next slide, please. So the next one. So regarding the white paper, you do have all access to it and the content. I just want to highlight a few things. First, what was our motivation? What was our driver to even work on this white paper? So I have put a couple of bullet points there, just from the perspective of what we felt were the most important ones. Where should an MNO start with the whole aerial drone space? How are services for those drones, or call it uncrewed aerial vehicles, or AKA UAVs, how are they monetizable by the MNOs? Not by the rest of the ecosystem, by the MNOs itself. And then how are some of the services that are based on the drones for enabling different business services monetizable by MNOs, things like the sensing and so on, and which business models to deploy for it, for the whole ecosystem. Those were some of the drivers that we have. Our purpose and our objective was to try to provide a set of recommended methodologies and what are some of the initial learnings regarding the potential business models for the aerial drones space. We got inputs from several MNOs that were contributing their journey so far in some of the use cases that are going to be presented later. Those MNOs are coming from different stages of development regarding the whole drone ecosystem for themselves, some of the markets that they were trying to address through the drones, coming also from the different regions and the different vertical focus they may have. Next slide, please. Business model in general, and on the left side, you're going to see something that we have borrowed from IEEE. What are they all about? They are about like what are you trying to create as a value for a customer? Who are those targeted customers? How you're planning to address that, and how much something like that would be capturable by the solutions that you're trying to do the business models around. The classification of the use cases that we have put in a white paper are following the three categories. Something that is most intuitive for the MNOs, the basic connectivity. Then we were capturing some of the use cases in a category of value-added services. And the very last one, we call it the full service provisioning or end-to-end provisioning those services for the end users. So hopefully this is something that will help you going through the interest parties on your own when you're reading or kind of propagating the material throughout your organizations. But we kind of wanted to categorize it to some extent for making the selective reads for you. Next slide, please. Some of the methodologies that you're going to come, and they're specifically captured in chapter 4, were related to how does the value chain of the stakeholders for drone ecosystem and specific use case within drone ecosystem look like? How do we map those stakeholders? What is the value proposition and perception canvas? And how does a canvas of eventual business model for it look like? So if you go and in most of those use cases in the white paper, you're going to be able to see the diagrams that are reflective of each of those topics that I'm listing here in methodology. We found them important from the perspective of trying to come up with something that will be a set of the distinguishing the aspects for the use cases, but through this exercise we found a lot of commonalities, especially within a specific use cases classification. So there will be an example of at least one presentation today that will probably touch base more on how does the generic versions of these methodologies apply to a specific use case. Next slide, please. So some of the content that we want to kind of highlight are related to market analysis. It was a courtesy mostly of the drone industry insight. We thank them this way in chapter 2. List of the use cases and the details from the multiple MNOs is provided in chapter number 5. We have some key learnings in the chapter number 6. And in appendixes, I really encourage you to look at that. We have done some overview of the status of regulation, I think September 2023 worldwide. And we have a significant number of the non-MNOs, we call them external stakeholders view. They were answering pre-canned set of the questions from their own perspective. So I really encourage you to kind of look at those external questionnaire fill-ins. This time around, I want to acknowledge the contributing entities from the MNOs. You will hear some of the speakers from China Mobile, from KDDI, from T-Mobile, KPN, Swisscom, Telia, Telstra, Telos, and Verizon. In no particular order. And those external stakeholders, we will have a chance to hear from some of them today. But in general, they are Chuch, Dimeter, Drone Insights, Involi, OneSky, SES, True Weather Solution, Uavionics, and Unmanned Life. With this, I'd like us to switch now to the one thing before we move on. Now we're going to go to the details on a few use cases, but for me, The message here is for those that are MNOs and those that are kind of taking their time to listen into this call is the following. This is a first attempt. So we have tried to come up with a list of the use cases that were making some type of the interest within those selected participants that were contributing to the content. We are not saying this is an exclusive list. So we want to hear from the auditorium, and Barbara will find some means to actually see what other use cases outside of this 1.0 version of the white paper you might want to see. And the second thing would be recognizing that this is already 140 pages document, and we don't want to turn it into 1,000 pages for the subsequent version by adding just more use cases. So we might take a few streams. Maybe one of the next steps would be, aside from gauging which of those we missed, taking actually some of those that were already explained to decent level of details here actually go into the double and triple clicking of what does that mean actually to do a true kind of business modeling with the details of everything for several of those that were already selected. And with that, I'd love to kind of switch to use cases presentation. Our first presenter today is Andreas Frisch from Deutsche Telekom. Andreas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alexander, and hello, everybody. The audience, my name is Andreas Frisch. I'm from Deutsche Telekom Group Technology, and I'm engaged in the topic of connected drones, as we called it, since 2016 around. So in the next minutes, let's have a look on the payload transmission for UAV operations via mobile networks. And of course, coming from a telco, it's the telco perspective on this one. So in general, we distinguish between command, which is the data transmission from the operator to the UAV, and if things work fine and according to plan, in particular in automated operations, the UAV operator even has no need to send additional commands. And so we expect a very narrowband data stream in this context. Control, which is the data transmission from the UAV to the operator, and maybe additionally to a UTM. So here we have, of course, status information like identity, position, basic data, which could be interesting for any kind of traffic management for the operator, of course. Then we have the full set of telemetry data relevant for the operator, and there might be an additional video stream. So given the pilot view, how the drone operates, and then payload. And payload summarizes any kind of data generated by instruments on the UAV to perform a certain mission and is independent from the command and control. So there could be even different kind of devices attached to a drone, fully independent of the flying object itself. And so the payload data is usually transmitted to the operator, but could go directly to a data analyst as well, with the drone operator just as a service provider for the flying part. So you already see regarding the size of these arrows. So payload is the real interesting part when it comes to amount of data. And furthermore, one of the special things is in drone operations, we expect mainly uplink traffic. So from the device into the network, which is a little bit different from the situation we face in terrestrial networks, where we mainly have downlink traffic. So while command and control might be quite similar for UAVs used in commercial purpose or even in the high-end consumer segment, maybe even following some standards, how the UAVs are operated and which kind of mechanisms, procedures, technologies are used for the data transmission. The payload transmission could be very, very different. And in fact, the payload could be such manifold as there are use cases for UAVs. So trying to do it with this kind of, let's say, nice picture, what can happen here? So there are UAVs operations with no payload. so related to data transmission, of course. Either there isn't any payload, for example, with a pure transport or delivery drone, so command and control is sufficient here, or the operator of the drone abstain from a payload transmission, since all data will be stored on a memory chip for ex-post analysis after landing. And on the other hand, we have drone operations which really depend on the just-in-time transmission of sensor and camera data. For instance, in a surveillance mission. So from a telco perspective, the payload aspect could be really challenging, in particular if you imagine the use of 4K, 8K spectral cameras, whatever you can imagine here, or a multitude of sensors, which really can sample a huge amount of data and try to transmit it back to any kind of server. And even those devices could operate together, so creating one huge amount of data stream. This could quickly amount to a request of a data stream to 30, 40, 50 megabit per second. We already had those requests. And this could, this is already a challenge on ground level, depending on the deployed network capacity in a location and the density of usage, shared network. And it does not make things easier when we now have a three-dimensional view on the network. So in general, we as mobile network operators have some tools to handle such situations. On the one hand, we anyhow increase our network capacity continuously by densification of the network via rollout of new base stations, providing new carriers on different spectrum layers, sectorization, both things. And on the other hand, there are some technologies such as slicing, which can help to provide dedicated capabilities to users. Might it be capacity or other features, latency often named here. But let's face it, three-dimensional network coverage is still a new topic. And UAVs as terminal devices in mobile networks are still the new kid on the block, I would like to say. And although a number of applications, tests, first deployments are already going with some kind of new ground for a telco. So on a terrestrial level, telcos are quite experienced where to expect most capacity demands over time regarding locations, but traffic structures and peak times as well. And accordingly, we are able to build up capacity based on our internal forecasts or recognized local figures in our network, load figures in our network. And in best case, consumers really recognize any kind of limit. So the combination now of a 3D network coverage demand and UAVs with their request for data transmission is something where we don't have such experience so far. So far, in most parts, I think connected drones or UAVs with mobile connectivity are still hard to find, beside the ongoing test and first operations. So providing payload capacities for UAVs, that raises a number of questions for us as the telcos. So where can we expect most of these UAV traffic and with what kind of payload demands? Is it in cities? Is it in rural areas? In what altitudes most flights will happen? What applications are mainly run? Do most drone operators, as I said before, really want to transmit data during the flight operation, or is the case of stored data on a memory chip and ex-post analysis the dominant case? And might we have very local use cases, in particular for surveillance, as a case for a permanent broadband data stream, which might be solved even very a local coverage implementation? So to make things a little more tangible, I draw a map a while ago from the location I'm coming from or where I'm living. So that's the area Bonn and Cologne. Bonn, we have here the headquarters of Deutsche Telekom. And what I tried to do here with this picture is some kind of imagination by myself, what could happen here in this area in a few years regarding drone traffic. So of course, we have the usual infrastructure with a lot of roads and, of course, railway tracks. We have the power lines, those things. We have the River Rhine. So, of course, there could be some kind of infrastructure inspections. We have the Cologne airport here, and this is a hub for a couple of package delivery services like DHL, UPS, FedEx, and so on. They have some kind of distribution centers in the cities as well. So there might be some kind of transport routes for delivery drones to provide high value, very urgent goods to one of their distribution centers. We have, of course, a lot of in yellow, the agriculture areas and the forestal areas in green. So there may be some kind of agriculture the agriculture areas here with according applications, forestal services as well. And you might remember Bonn was the capital of Germany between 1949 and 1990. So we still have some ministers here, in particular the defense ministry here on the Hartberg. So that's, of course, a special security area. They will have their surveillance to control their area, which is true for the UN campus in Bonn as well. And we have the big oil refinery in Wesseling, so an industry area where you might expect some kind of course, surveillance drones testing if there is any kind of gas or in the air or something like that. So a huge amount of different use cases. But in the moment, a big question mark. What will really happen? Is the mobile network request to support these services, or do they have their own solution? Maybe, with wireless LAN still, or maybe it's very local and those things. So that's really challenging what will happen in a few years. And please keep in mind, current terrestrial networks are the result of more than 2 decades of optimization, but an optimization with focus on the terrestrial usage. And unfortunately, an application which runs perfectly in 2-meter altitude don't have the same performance automatically in 200-meter altitude. And any expectation, a performance level based on optimization for a 2-meter altitude can be easily transferred to 100 or a 200-meter altitude is not realistic. So my question related to where to expect most requests for data transmission from UAVs has an economical background. So we have the technical means as telco to build solutions providing whatever requested connectivity. It's more or less a question of money, and technology is available. But building single solutions for only one dedicated use case or a single user is quite expensive. So it definitely helps to realize economics of scale to create an economic base from network operator and from UAV operator perspective. And the more similar demand we have, the more likely an efficient solution can be provided. Remember here my roads in the for these delivery roads, or a hub or a drone pod or something like that. But I believe as well, once we get more and more flight operations and experience what is demanded by the market of connected drone operations, there will be the related connectivity solutions even for sophisticated payload missions, which meet the demand of all involved partners. And with this remark, thank you for your attention, and back to you, Alexander.
Thank you very much, Andreas. Really thorough presentation from your side. Some questions started popping up in the chat. So if any one of the panelists is in a position to address them before the panel, would be great. Otherwise, we'll try to cover them in a panel. Our next presenter is Greg Welch from Verizon. He's going to walk us through the position augmentation use case. Greg, the floor is yours.
Okay, checking my audio. I'm good. And thanks for having me on to discuss this use case as part of our drone services white paper. So position augmentation. I'm a part of the 5G acceleration group within Verizon Business, which means we focus on those use cases for 5G in industry and enterprises. So I say my the term I use is 5G beyond the smartphone. And of course, UAVs, connected vehicles in general, is a key component of that. Slide, please. So what is the problem that we're looking at? What is the problem space that we're looking at? So if I look at positioning in general, 99%, if not more, of the planet general users in most developed areas are familiar with GPS or GNSS positioning. It's in just about every vehicle, smartphone. However, when we look at positioning accuracy, GPS only or GNSS only positioning, due to certain aspects of the global satellite infrastructure that is constructed and the timing issues, you find that GNSS only positioning has only a 3 to 9 meter accuracy. So that, if you think about it, converting to feet for those folks like in the US who still operate in feet, you're looking at, what is potentially almost a 30-foot accuracy discrepancy between where someone thinks they are and where they actually are. So that means that if you're looking at any type of mission with high precision navigation requirement, GPS only, GNSS only is going to be unsuitable for that. Even with crewed vehicle, so general aircraft, manned vehicle operations today, internationally, especially here in the US, we have a requirement for augmented GPS operations because GPS only is not sufficient, especially in our high density airspace. So we have something called ADSB, which is or WAS, which is an augmentation of GPS to provide higher accuracy. So that if you look at drone use cases and the drone operations, you can easily extrapolate the requirement for higher accuracy to drones. And what does that actually look like? Just as an illustration, this is a plot, an illustrative plot of a vehicle recording its position as it traverses an obstacle course. And you can see with standard GPS, you have what looks like a scatter plot of random points based on the inherent error rate, the inherent errors within standard GPS. Position augmentation services can bring that down to centimeter level accuracy. There are a number of techniques available out there, and of course, we'll talk a little bit more about what's coming up with 5G itself. But just looking at the difference between those two plots, you can imagine several use cases where the top diagram would be tenable. It would be unusable for that situation, whereas you need something which is closer to what's on the bottom diagram. So position augmentation services mandatory for certain UAV operations, especially if I look at high density areas and areas requiring precision and use cases or uses of drones that require precision navigation. You would not get the necessary accuracy with standard GPS. Next slide. Now, when we talk about a business case or a use case, we have to say, well, what is the applicability of that business case? If I'm an MNO making investment, I want to make that as broadly applicable as possible. And you see that although UAVs might anchor from the left to the right, my anchor are thinking or the value proposition for position augmentation, you can see that it is broadly applicable across many other industries, or even maybe industries where UAVs are being used to provide, for instance, in agri-tech, UAVs being used to provide services within agri-tech. So position augmentation as a business case, as a value proposition is fairly broadly applicable across many uses. So it bodes well for a service provider, even though we're focused on drones and UAVs. Making an investment in position augmentation services makes it pretty broadly applicable and maybe a business case. So I won't go through all of these, but I'm sure anyone can look at this list of examples and see something that is that they can resonate with, and probably either right here, right now, or in the not too distant future, these use cases becoming more and more relevant. Next slide. So it's a little bit of the Verizon specific take on position augmentation. We have a service called hyper precise location services, and so MNOs are particularly well positioned to provide position augmentation services due to the nature of our network. We have a very widely deployed network with fairly precisely surveyed installation locations. We know where each and every antenna, each and every tower is deployed with fairly high levels of accuracy. So we can use the accuracy of the locations within our own network to provide sort of a supplemental feed to augment GPS readings. And that is exactly what we provide with Verizon. You see this map across the continental US. You see two shadings, the lighter shade, purple shade, and the deeper purple shade. We actually deploy two GPS augmentation services in parallel. Not to go into the gory details, one called differential GNSS and the other called RTK, or real-time kinematics. The difference is, as you could imagine, the one in purple in the higher density areas provides a much higher level of accuracy. That's an RTK based, different technologies, similar uses, but the RTK providing over an order of magnitude level of accuracy. So in the purple areas, you can expect from our hyper precise location centimeter level accuracy with properly equipped vehicle with a properly equipped receiver. In the lighter shade areas, you can get still better than GPS, only probably meter level or sub-meter level accuracy. So you're getting things down to under 3 feet, maybe a foot or less, even in the lighter shaded areas, and in the darker shaded areas, in the higher density locations, you're going to get down to the centimeter level. And so looking at that again, I believe MNOs in general are well positioned. We think we are, and we have deployed this network. Talk a little bit about, now this is not, even though I'm in the 5G group, this is not something that is right now natively provided by our 5G, and that does have some particular aspects to it that are maybe worth noting. We'll talk a little bit about that in a panel discussion. That should be my last slide. And
Greg,
so I'm going to hand it over.
Thank you very much for this fantastic presentation. Very interesting topic, and thanks for taking the time to walk us through that. Our next presenter will be Paolo Moretti from TELUS. This is going to be slightly more in line of what's the content of the white paper. We did that deliberately so that our readers are familiar with some of the methodologies that I was referring to earlier. So this is really going to be application of those methodologies into the specific use case. The use case is not easy. It's about use-based service providers or UTM service supplier case where the MNOs play such a role. But hopefully you'll be able to get the gist out of it from Paolo's presentation. Paolo, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Alexander. My name is Paolo Moretti, as Alexander mentioned, joining from TELUS, and I'm on the product team. So a lot of what we focus on here is working with some of the intelligent folks on the call here and commercializing some of the products that are available. And I think the biggest kind of glue that holds us all together is the UTM piece here, which is incredibly complex with lots of different stakeholders here. So if we go to the next slide here, it's a good view of the value chain. So yeah, lots of moving parts in this, and sometimes it can be challenging to wrap your head around everything here. And then also from an MNO perspective, try to understand where it is that we want to play, where A, we want to play, and then also B, where we can be successful in providing value and not bogging some of the solutions down. From a UTM perspective, it really does unlock some of the cooler or the sexier use cases that we hear about, whether that's automation, whether that is operating from a command center, higher density areas, and BV loss operations. So they all tie in there. Long haul flights. Some of the challenges that we have, or what we think about often, is try to balance the need for safety, cost, and technical complexity. So the more solutions, the more integrations you have, the more potential for breakdown. And when you're talking about human lives, it gets very serious very quickly. So when you look at this component here, the MNOs need to make a decision where do we want to play? Can we move up the value chain, and where are we successful at this point? So some of our traditional services, which I know some of the folks touched on here, so from the telemetry perspective and infrastructure, we're obviously very good at cellular connectivity. Can we augment some of that to allow for a high resilient network, as well as remote tracking and using some of our existing capabilities and authentication from SIM cards and other modems to be able to do that. Obviously, a lot of data moving back and forth, so we do have capabilities and relationships with hyperscalers to build that out. Lots of software as well associated with it. So the data itself is quite interesting, and MNOs are in a unique position to be able to understand from a crowd perspective who's where, times of day that people are operating, when they're moving, and overall the risk associated with that. Using our connectivity to be able to pass that data along securely, and then also to try to figure out how we can work nicely with some of the non-terrestrial networks from satellites, so we can ignore them or we can try to integrate them, which we've been trying to do. So when we look at it from our perspective, from TELUS, we see ourselves working well between the traditional telemetry pieces, but also the data storage along to the data provider and connectivity. We're interested in moving up the value chain and providing, or down the value chain in this case here, to provide more of the services. So whether that is with some of our partners from unveil life perspective, to provide orchestration or other robotic capabilities. We also too have the question overall from an industry perspective, where it's do we want to incubate our own capabilities or work through partners for some of the things that aren't natural to us? And yeah, next slide, please. So if we look at some of the stakeholders here, some of the primary stakeholders, we have the MNOs, the UTMs, the data ISVs, the U-Space UTM providers, which we work with closely, UAV operators, the FIMs, and the regulatory bodies as well too. So how do we get everyone working together, build a system that works for everyone and passes information along? Some of the customers are the people who will be operating with these systems. So again, the government regulatory bodies, the safety entities, cloud and edge SPs, insurers, and real estate leasers. Next slide here. So we think quite a bit about the UAV operator. So one of the things that we're trying to do is avoid bogging down some of the smaller drone operators. So we do understand this is a bit of a innovative environment, and it's a grassroots innovation that we're seeing. So a lot of these smaller operators, we don't want to bog them down with costs. So at this point, in order to disrupt the market, you need to improve on either quality, cost, quality and cost, or time to delivery at this point. And when we look at some of the traditional options, so especially for like deliveries as an example, I think what Amazon deliveries hover around $7 USD at this point per delivery. So how do you be competitive with that? And the only answer I think at this point is volume. So we need to have a lot of drones in the sky delivering. So it's trying to balance the cost. What's the minimal viable solution that keeps people safe and makes the money for folks involved. Some of the value propositions for the customer. So in Canada, when we provide when we apply for BVLOS or SORA approvals, it can take upwards of 30 days. So it makes it very difficult to turn around quickly on some of the requests. So we did have a customer, hey, can we do a flight in what was considered a low risk environment? We needed 30 business days. So that was 6 weeks in order to get an application approved. So lots of running around, escalations on our end, which we would like to avoid that. So how do we get to a standardized data-driven option in which we can pass the information back and forth? So again, some of these UAV smaller operators don't have the resources or the muscle in order to talk to some of these regulatory groups. So how do we help them get their missions approved in a safe fashion? Next slide, please. So from the regulatory body's perspective, we are cognizant that ultimately they are trying to protect people on the ground. They don't want. So when we talk to some of the regulatory bodies, the biggest thing we hear is we don't want drones falling on top of people's heads, which is totally understandable. So how do we keep this safe for everybody involved, and how do we be respectful to these bodies? And also to try to keep the regulations as light as possible and balance safety. Next slide, please. So there's sort of 3 solutions and business models that we see. So one of them is pushing the costs directly to the UAV operators. So have them pay for some sort of licensing fee in order to operate with these value-added UTM services, get some of the data up front and allow them to turn around some of their applications and get approved for flights easily. The second option would be to go directly to the government bodies and have them share the cost. They're not as interested in doing that. And then the other option from an MNO perspective would be just to push it off onto the UTMs, and then we provide the input data. So some of that ground forecast data and connectivity maps and things of that nature. So those are sort of the 3 options that we're looking at moving forward on about a 3 to 4 year horizon. And then the last one here is sort of the business model canvas. So next slide. This sort of stitches together some of the key components that we look at from a product marketing perspective. So some of the key partners involved here. So again, the data providers, the BVLOS enabled solutions, the hardware, the platforms, and the software providers, the system integrators that are going to pull all this together, trying to look at some of the key activities of what we want to deliver and not forget about what we're trying to do. And then try to pull some of the key resources in. So the UAV operations centers, the UAV operators themselves, and some of the UTM SMEs. The value proposition would be that MNO is an integrated CS2 to CSP. MNO provided UTM and data services. So overall, just bringing that whole picture together. Again, one of the things we look at is what are the channels for revenue. So is it direct digital to UAV operators? Is it as value add data services to some of these providers who are providing the services, which I think they would like us to operate in? Some of the customer segments, the folks that we're talking to are the FIMs, the SPs, the ANSPs, the USP providers themselves, or the UAV operators. Revenue stream, so again, transactional based on API consumption, on a per mission basis or a subscription-based model. And then our cost structure, so the real estate itself, support, and then the licensing and hosting. And that's the end of the slides.
Thank you very much, Paolo, for this difficult use case to kind of get a business model around, but we felt it was important to touch upon it. We're slightly behind schedule, but I wouldn't be so much worried about it. Our next presenter is Philip Eder from Swisscom. He's going to walk us through the people density, or more accurate term would be probably air and risk analysis services per se. So Philip, the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks a lot for having me here. I try to catch up a bit in time, but please feel free.
Don't worry, don't worry.
to interrupt me. Do you see me changing the slide? Good, very good. Then just as explanation, we are Swisscom. We have a unit drones and robots, and this has two parts. One is drone operation. Here, that's a marketing slide called Good Guys, where we actually fly drones and bring all the service for flying drones. And then we have also the so-called Bad Guys, that are all services around drone detection. Now here, let me focus a bit more on the Good Guys part, meaning the operational, the safety in operation of drones. First of all, let's look a bit at the use cases. So we talk a lot about delivery drones and all those kinds of drones, but this is a very complex topic as they fly quite far and they are quite heavy. But there is a huge market need, and we try to address that market need as we see us also as a digitalization partner of Switzerland. For example, the perimeter protection. In Switzerland, we have about a lack of 10% of security personnel, so there is a huge market need for drone operation, which actually can replace, for example, a security personnel. Then a huge market is also the patrol in rough terrain. Here we have other difficulties. Here we need to fly long distances, but we have not that many people underneath us. So the safety, let's say, is a bit higher of this flight, or the danger of people is smaller. And then a huge market need is also inspection. And with that, all kind of, let's say, asset-based tracking. That means we get a GPS location and we should be able to fly to that location. And these are all use cases which need to be covered. And at the moment, the drone market is a bit, it's not growing that fast, I think, at least in Europe, but maybe also Europe-wide as expected. And it's really needed that we are getting more BVLOS operation, because then the business case for all those kind of use cases will also be working in behind of that. And as an MNO, we need to provide services to be able to actually provide that future with BVLOS flight. Behind visual line of sight is BVLOS, for those who have not heard that term yet. And we as MNO need to provide services to be able to, that drone operator can perform that. And on one side, we have already heard it, the mobile coverage is very important. We need to make sure that we have enough mobile coverage in the air. And we also need to make sure that we can provide, let's say the flight or the air business wants always to speak about SLA. That's a bit complicated for us as MNOs to define SLA on mobile network, but we need to have here a solution how we can prove a reliable network in the air. This is going to be very important. And it's also going to be an approach there is that SAIL term, so the security level. So a small drone will need less secured connection than a drone where maybe even people can fly in. This is very important to know, and this is important that we can provide as MNO all that services. But yeah, this is, let's say, our main business. But it goes way further than this. We also speak by the drone operation of ground risk and air risk. And also here we have a very important role. From the air risk, there is that whole UTM topic, but there we can also help as animals to detect airplanes in the air, to deliver those information to drone operation, to other entities. That's very important. And the most important at the moment, because this is very needed with the SORA 2.5, is the people density. And the problem here is at the moment, if you consider how safe a flight is, you normally look at the population density data. Here you can see now a picture. This is in Zurich, the busiest street, the busiest shopping street in Zurich. Obviously, nobody is living there. So if you look at the population density data, you would say, okay, it's safe to fly there. But if you look at our Swisscom mobile phone data, you see that obviously this is the area where the most people are, and where EASA and so on wants to make sure that no drones are flying there. So we as MNO need here to provide population density data, and this is something we can, and this is also something with Camara which have been standardized, but this is really something which is urgently needed to bring the whole drone industry forward. We are the only one as animals who have, let's say, a market distribution of young person, older person, that we can, with an extrapolation, very easily say how many people are at different locations. And this is something which is really needed from us, and which we are needing to be able to do. At the moment, at Swisscom, we provide that data in hundreds times 100 meter squares. And to be sure that we have no problem with the data protection, we don't show squares which have less than 21 people in one square. So this is a method that we can show without having a data protection problem how many people are there. And this is very essential, this information, which helps the authority then to say whether what's the risk of a drone flight. How we are doing that, we have 2 years data into the back, and from that data we can also do a prediction. Into the prediction, we also take into the account the weather, because obviously that's very important in saying how many people will be at a certain location. And with that, we can really provide accurate data to the drone operator, but also to the authority, and can make sure that a drone flight is very secure. There are different, let's say, use cases. Normally, you have a very repeating structure of people, like in the morning at a certain place, by a certain weather, there are always the same amount of people. But there are also events. This is now one of our customers' place, like a big expo. And obviously there it goes so far that the authority will need real-time data in how many people are at certain places. I know this is very difficult to calculate, because it's a lot of data crunching. But also here it's always important that the drone market is relatively small and relatively sensitive in terms of what the drone operator can pay. But for certain area, then let's say in a non-populated area, there is just a statistic data is enough. In areas where all the time like around the same people are, it's okay to have dynamic data and have a prediction. And then in areas like this, like expos, it's obviously very important to have near real-time data. This is a presentation which I just showed you, which has also been presented to EASA. And EASA sees the NMOs as the provider for that kind of data. And this is really the most important next step to bring that drone business forward. And with that, I'm also at the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Philip, thank you very much for walking us through the people density. With this, I'd like us to switch the gears to start the panel. Aside from Andreas from Deutsche Telekom, Greg from Verizon, Philip from Swisscom, and now we are going to have also Nicholas from Unmanned Life. We're going to have Mr. Su from China Mobile, John from SES, Don from True Weather Solution, and Emrah from Chuch being part of our panel. Just one thing before we move on, there was one individual who helped Philip in the background, which I want to recognize, Klaus Pils. He's also on the call with us today, and if needed to have something, Philip in the background from the Swisscom's perspective, he generously made himself available for us. Okay, so I'd love to start with a question. Some of those are coming through the chat. Some of those will come prior to the call. But first, I'd like to start with a question for Philip. Can you share your perspective on how an MNO can turn into C2 CSP for UAV operators, and how MNO business models would evolve with it?
So yes, so the base will always be to provide mobile connectivities, but then adding on that, it's also going to be more reliable connectivity. This is very important then for the more complex cases, but next to that, it's very important that we help for the ground risk and the air risk, so that we can tell the authorities and also the drone operation where are the people and what's in the air. And this is a package we need to provide as NMOs in my eyes to be able to help the industry to scale up.
Okay. Thank you very much, Philip. Greg, there was one question for yourself. Which challenges you see for pragmatic rollout of the business models related to positioning augmentation? Greg, you might be on a mute.
Sorry about that. Clicked and it didn't happen.
Right.
Yeah. So let me start with my brilliant opening. Yeah. So one of the things that we as a challenge is to rolling out position augmentation with the current state of mobile technology is that, especially with 5G, as you know, positioning is a big part of the 5G standard. However, if you look at the level of that can be provided today with the networks that we have rolled out today and with the way the standards are, largely focused on, first of all, indoor positioning, and they just don't, for the GPS or for outdoor locations, give that level of accuracy that will be required. It would be very similar if I just used a pure mobile network. you would get very similar or even worse than GPS level of accuracy. So the challenge that we had is that for that, just to do it based on the mobile network, it was not possible. So we rolled out sort of an overlay service. Now, the benefit of doing that is that overlay service it's independent of our mobile network, but it also increases the complexity, let's say, of the consumer, the person using that service, because now they have to have not only just our mobile connectivity, but they also have some type of receiver which is capable of receiving and processing our GPS augmentation. Now, it's a standard protocol. It's nothing proprietary that we have developed. It's a standard protocol, well known, used by surveying companies. As a matter of fact, you see drone manufacturers starting to produce modules which fit their most popular models. But again, those are all additional costs for someone operating drones. So, the challenge being, again, it's an overlay service. The ideal would be maybe to move it where we have the technology available from a single network.
Okay, thank you very much, Greg. Emret, this one, I think it's most suitable for yourself. What are the key go-to-market challenges for an MNO to offer computer vision as a service leveraging aerial drones?
Yeah, thank you, Alexander. Great question. I'm Emmer Gultikin, everybody. Hey, nice to see you all. We're a vision AI company based out of Silicon Valley, and basically, you definitely want to be offering vision AI first of all. I mean, that's something that's key to having drones flying around. If you have cameras, you want as much intelligence behind them as possible, specifically for the upsell into the clients. So one of the things that we've been seeing in the market is that many companies try and develop the CV capabilities internally, and usually they pretty much limited success with those types of things. And the reason is it gets complex very quickly. So geospatial specifically AI is very complex based on compared to land-based vision. Mainly because of limited public data. There's limited public data for that. And so to be able to develop the models for it is also very complex. And then you have the inferencing needs, you have restricted compute and so forth. On top of that, for geospatial, you've got EO, IR, you've got SAR data, you've got different types of imaging data coming in that need to be fused as well. So it gets very complex quickly. So you have AI companies like us, we're spending millions of dollars developing these capabilities, and that's all we do. And you have many companies doing this. And we're trying to provide the plug and play stack for it. And so what are the challenges in developing these computer vision AI services internally and externally are? So there are four main challenges, I would say. One are the models themselves. Developing models that are production ready is really a problem. One of the main issues is accuracy, as you know, and repeatability of those models. This relies a lot on data and the fine-tuning of the models and so forth. The second challenge is inferencing and orchestration. So you have now, maybe you have a few models and you want to orchestrate them. How do you get them on board? How do you inference the models on production level, either on board, cloud, hybrid, still using 5G, but how do you do that in a restricted environment like a drone? And then the third problem is analytics itself. So if you look at analytics, like you're now inferencing at 6 millisecond speeds, how do you present that data to a human so it's consumable, right? So that's also a challenge in this whole thing. And then finally, and probably the hardest, is the maintenance and constant. So you need to constantly develop and maintain these systems. And these things are changing very quickly now, as you know, in AI. 3 to 6 months life cycle. We're talking now about LVMs, deploying large vision models. So it's changing very, very quickly. So long story short, I would recommend, you can develop a few of these models yourself, but if you're going to go really into production, I would recommend partnering with a vision AI company for sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Some of us have learned that very same lesson the harder way by actually going and trying and hitting the walls. Thank you, Red. Nicholas, from the unmanned lights perspective, what takes for an MNO to offer a compelling business model to efficiently monetize orchestration services for drones, for robots, and for sensors for the multi-domain automation?
Yeah, thank you, Alexander. And first, congratulations on the white paper. It's very thorough and complete for us. We have been working for several years with several MNOs, and we see that it's very comprehensive.
Thanks on behalf of the team. Thanks on the behalf of the team. It was an army of people that you, some of them here today here. Thanks. Go ahead.
And so what we can tell you as a company that is we are a software platform that will provide the orchestration platform for drones and robots, right? And the way we see the market for MNOs, you have different models. You have MNOs that can be the operators, that they are offering the orchestration platform to their customers. There are others that are working hand in hand, where we can be delivering the projects where there is no UAV expertise with these MNOs. Or what we have been doing also, we are doing more the R&D, and we are testing the new business models around the open gateway and the APIs and quality on demand, and this is more from a purely application developer. So all these business models, I mean, I structure them on the infrastructure as a service or the software and services, and where I see is that where the MNOs should go where the higher margins are possible. I once met one CCO of one large cell who told me, okay, I will go where I can create a new vertical with 50 million USD. And the question is, can you create a 50 million USD per year with drones and robots? And the question is, in a large market, yes, because you are talking about industries where you have multi-site deployments, you have large capabilities, and this is precisely why orchestration is going to give you all these volumes. You can sell licenses, you can say bundled services, you can sell services where you can go and deploy, you can monetize infrastructure. That's why we see orchestration as a very important business model. One advice that I also see as the external partner is be careful with external competition, because agility is also key to win the markets. Because there are key differentiators that an MNO has to win the market, but agility is not always the key differentiator of MNOs. So yes, there are key differentiators where MNOs can win the market, but there is external competition also to be careful of.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Appreciate it. Do we have Don from True Weather Solution with us? Okay, Don, I think this one is for you. What is your recommendation for MNO's role related to precise forecasting of the weather services for low altitude flying drones, and which business models regarding these services are most suitable in various geographical markets, if there is any difference?
Yes, well, first of all, again, I want to also credit the folks who put the white paper together. I think there's a lot that could be learned in the white paper on the impact of weather to this industry, and the fact that the current systems for aviation weather were not built for low altitude weather. And I think that this presents an opportunity for the MNOs, because you have infrastructure, you have communications, you have ways to get edge compute out there that can allow for processing of new data sets that we are introducing into the market today. So basically, 3%, only 3% of the area in either the US, Canada, or Europe has real weather measurements below 5,000 feet. Most of the weather measurements below 5,000 feet are either 2 balloon launches a day for satellites to collect weather data, or you have aircraft landing in and out of airports. 97% of the area does not have real cloud ceiling height, does not have visibility, does not have winds aloft. So the models are not very good, and this has been identified. We're working on a new weather standard under ASTM that's going to allow for IoT weather data sets to be integrated into the aviation system for drones and air taxis and eVTOLs. And this is going to be a game changer, because the more data we can collect, the better we're going to be able to improve the precision of micro weather. And so we've been working on this, True Weather has, and been working with some of the MNOs out there to work on this business case for using your infrastructure and capabilities to become a service provider for micro weather services, as well as being able to do some edge processing, collecting data from drones, taking that data locally and turning around, detect and avoid areas of hazards that today are not available through the regular weather services. And so this presents an amazing market opportunity where we have the juxtaposition of advanced weather sensing technology and capabilities that has been available, but just not getting into operations because there hasn't been a business case for it, and with this emerging market need and where you guys sit. So what I'll say here is that, I would encourage you to look at the several pages in here on the weather piece. If you have any questions, please reach out to me directly. The business model is simple, right? We get sensors out on towers. We close the low altitude weather gaps. We collect revenue from from the data sales, as well as the value-added products that we will build, both from a weather perspective, which is go, no go kind of decisions, comprehensive alerting, but also in the analytics of the risk management and the SOAR that others in this have talked about. Weather data getting integrated into those analytic tools that help with overall risk management of the flight with much better weather data. And I'll end it with this. The industry is spending a lot of money on precision engineering, precision communications, precision detect and avoid, precision flight management through UTM. But the one thing that's not going to be more precise is the weather. And so that's the weakest link in this whole value chain. So you can have all those precisions, but this is what will happen. Today, 30% of manned aviation, crewed aviation, that is canceled or delayed due to weather could have flown. It could have flown. It's the uncertainty that's driving that cancellation, and that costs money and it costs revenue. The industry here is going to have a 40% attrition rate if we don't have better micro weather. And that attrition rate for weather should be about 20%. So what we're trying to do is working with you and other partners is we want to get better data so we can get more certainty in the system, lower the risk, increase flights. And that's really the business model here, Ali.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your inputs and insights on this one, Don. There's one question for John from SCS AI. John, what does it take from a business model for various stakeholders in automated infrastructure inspection and critical assets monitoring to make it win for all and to unleash the scalability for this set of the use cases? John? John, we don't hear you.
Sorry, I was double muted. Is that? Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Excuse me. Maybe I'll do a very quick intro. So we're a company called Seed AI. We're UK based, backed by Boeing, founded by a senior team from Apple, CERN, McLaren, and hedge funds. 2 times winner of the America's Cup, a 1-time winner of the Formula 1 World Championship. So an old and ugly team and been around the block developing and deploying technology. Our focus is on developing an enterprise solution that enables drone service providers to deploy connected autonomous drone fleets at national scale beyond visual line of sight. And in the long term, we can imagine our technology being used all the way through to mobility. But today we're much more focused on industrial use cases. So we fly systems beyond visual line of sight down the grid, around oil and gas assets, around offshore wind turbines, and we do that truly kind of in a connected and autonomous way from beyond visual line of sight. So hence the question, I think, infrastructure focused. And maybe I should add, we have the most advanced, two of the most advanced beyond visual line of sight permissions in the UK, probably top 10 in the world in terms of being able to fly systems beyond visual line of sight. I mean, I have a simple answer to that question. I think, when you're a large asset owner and operator, you want a simple solution, really. And even if you're an internal operator inside a large asset owner and operator, you still want a simple solution. And I think this call has been really interesting. We've talked about hyperlocal weather, about risk analysis on the ground, about advanced positioning, obviously cellular comms. There's so many pieces of the puzzle, so many pieces of technology. I think the answer lies in, this is ultimately a networked innovation space. We need to find ways to work together to enable operators. Today, these are small companies. We need to enable them to start flying from a control room in a way that they can generate economies of scale, and in a way they can start to grow quickly and become what they should be, which is, of course, very large companies flying safety critical and mission critical technology, which is, of course, a specialist capability. And so I think somehow we need to find ways to collapse the stack to make all of these amazing technologies useful to the operator in the first instance, I would say. In my case, I'm thinking a little bit more generically, whether someone's flying a package or supporting emergency services or doing data processing data. It really all is the same. In order to be able to operate a system beyond visual line of sight for various different purposes, we need to collapse all of this technology together. I mean, our point of view is, of course, biased. The technology we're pulling together enables a system to understand its own position very accurately, to do its own autonomous navigation, sense and avoid, dynamic path planning. In the future, a lot of that will be based on hyperlocal weather and risk analysis. We've done some work with partners on that. And then to execute the mission. And then off board, we pull together a lot of other technologies, of course, connectivity, UTM, ATM, remote ID, in order to be able to enable kind of scaled, safe deployment. So we're potentially one entity that enables a lot of these technologies to come together into a simple solution that a third party can access. But whether it's us or others, I think the answer that I would put forward is we have to find ways to make the whole stack simpler and more purchasable for an operator that wants to just go and fly drones and to be able to service large asset owners and operators.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John. I see a lot of networking going on in the chat, which is good. So we may come to some of those questions. We have two more that were coming prior to the call, which I'm going to try to pose right now. Mr. Su, from China Mobile's perspective, because you described the cell on wings use case in a white paper that the auditorium can read, where integrated communication is desired. So you're using the cellular and satellite, maybe even the hubs. How do the potential business models for that integrated communication differ compared to, let's say, if you're just using a ground trailer to bring the connectivity on demand from the mobile base station?
Yes, thank you, Alexander. Means in my white paper of business model can quickly restore communication interruptions.
Mr. Su, we need a little bit louder speaking or closer to the mic, if you don't mind.
Can you hear me? That's okay?
Yes. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Cell on wings can quickly restore the communications and interruption caused by natural disasters. In such harsh conditions, ground trailer often cannot reach such thing quickly and complete the task. The disruption of the roads, electricity, and networks caused by extremely severe disasters has always had a huge impact on the lives and property safety of the people in disaster-stricken areas. So compared with the potential business model of ground trailers, the cell on the wings, when we use this use case in such scenario for emergency communication and rescue activities, and we have to put the communication equipment on the big fixed wing drills, and the big fixed wing drill need relatively a long runway at the airport to take off and landing. So this is a high costly. So for these conditions, we provide our customers with this service, customer can pay for single use, for every time use. This relatively reduced the cost of our customers. And for the ground trailers, is mostly for the ordinary customers, can be built for monthly or annual basis, and the costly is low relatively. That is a difference between the ground trailer and the cell on the wing. That's a difference for the business model. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Su. So I just want to mention one thing. Some of those cell on the wings or similar type of services are built for the emergency services or in general public services companies. The business models over there would very much differ from state circumstances to state circumstances, but we need to think about monetization of some of the professional services that we're bringing here for a public service. They typically want a flat fee, a long-lasting contract to start with. Okay, the last question from the panel today would be for Andreas. Andreas, one of the use cases we described in white paper were related to the monetization of the end-to-end quality of service. So question for you is, what do you see as a further evolution of MNO's business model for monetization of its seller network end-to-end quality of service for the drones going forward, past the potential 3 streams that you already listed in the white paper?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, it really starts with the network, but now in a 3-dimensional perspective. And yeah, that's something new for us as well. So it already appears on the chat what can be done here, maybe up-tilted antenna, MIMO, that all are ideas. But on the other hand, it should be directed antennas on the UAV as well to make it really work. And yeah, there are interference effects we have to handle, but that's more or less no magic, but really physics. Well, we as telcos, as mobile network operators are very familiar with. But you asked for things beyond the pure network. I think this is more or less still a question of getting more experience. So consultation from a network perspective could be a very valuable input for the drone industry as well, what works, what doesn't work. Other things, what I really see is some technologies coming up which could be really interesting, maybe even not designed for the drone business. So precise positioning beyond a GPS signal was already addressed here in the call. Sensing technologies in context with 5G. Something like a second radar could be very interesting. Already mentioned by Philip, these population density things. So maybe directly from telcos towards UAV operators or in consultation or API. I think there are a lot of opportunities what we can done with our assets as telco for the UAV operators. What works have to be found out. I think we are still in a very early phase, and I still believe there still has to be these economies of scale, maybe starting with some kind of drone ports, with some kind of larger test areas, things like corridors for drone operations where we can really provide input to see what works, what doesn't work, what are the real demands from the drone industry. And then we find out what beyond connectivity is requested and what can we deliver as telco. So I think quite interesting and a lot of things to learn in the future.
Andreas, thank you very much. It's almost like there is nobody could do better conclusion, because you are one of those heavy lifters of the white paper. I want to acknowledge you personally and the rest of the folks as well who may or may not be able to join us today. With this, I know, and when Barbara and myself and Dan prepared Mr. Su, we thought like this should be almost 3-hour session. So within an hour and a half, we were only able to achieve this much. There will be opportunities for further dialogues on business models for the drone space. So with this, I would like to kind of adjourn the panel to kind of thank everyone for being with us during the panel here today, and for the closing remarks and the wrap up, back to Barbara. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Indeed, it's been a pleasure to have you here. And please, for the audience, if you have further questions, don't forget to send it to us. And we also want to hear your thoughts. So we are just here to listen to you. So give us feedback. You feel free to reach out to myself or to Dan, which organized this session. You have information on our website. Tell us what you think and which area you believe it's more useful for yourself, or which one is less. So as all of them said, we are here. It's just the first iteration. We hope to add more detail and to work better with all of you. So as also John said, we have to work together. So I want to thank you, everyone. Again, we will provide the recording. Just give us a little bit of time. And if we have other questions that we didn't answer, we'll see if I can get back to you with some information. Again, it was a pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all our speakers. See you soon.